I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The sun was shining outside, but for me, it felt like everything was cloudy. I was lying in bed, unable to get up, unable to think about anything but this heavy weight crushing my chest. And the worst part, I didn't know why. Nothing specific had happened that morning. But there, under the blankets, it felt like I was sinking into an endless void. I'm Rachel Harper. Today, I'm sharing a story that highlights the deep struggles many face behind closed doors. This story is based on real events, but some names and details have been changed to protect the privacy of those involved. If this story resonates with you, please consider sharing, liking, and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. Now let's get into today's story. I'm Gabriel, 29 years old, a software engineer. And for the past 2 years, depression has taken over my life in a way I never thought possible. Before all this began, I had a stable career, friends I hung out with regularly, a supportive family, and a 7-year relationship. On the outside, everything seemed in place, but inside, things had been falling apart for a while. I just didn't want to admit it. Depression didn't hit me like a storm, tearing everything apart at once. It came in like a slow, quiet tide, until, before I knew it, I was drowning. It felt like a part of me was fading away, and I couldn't find a reason. At first, I thought it was just exhaustion or maybe a rough patch, but that sense of emptiness didn't go away. In fact, it grew, suffocating me a little more each day. When depression first started to take hold of me, it felt like a deep emptiness, as if something vital had been ripped away. It was a shadow that settled in slowly, like a thick fog blanketing everything around me. The joy that once filled my everyday life vanished, and I found myself losing interest in things I used to love. Hobbies, going out with friends, even cooking, which had always been my escape, now felt like burdens too heavy to carry. At work, the pressure mounted daily. That drive to push myself and excel turned into a constant struggle just to show up. The computer, once an extension of my creativity, became a blank screen reflecting my paralysis. It was like my ideas had turned to smoke, slipping through my fingers no matter how desperately I tried to hold on. And with each passing day, the guilt of not being able to keep up grew, feeding a vicious cycle of self-criticism. The people around me, noticing something was off, tried to cheer me up. There were sympathetic smiles and encouraging words, but inside, I felt like a stranger in my own body. The discomfort was overwhelming because I couldn't explain what was happening. Even though I loved my family and friends, their presence sometimes amplified my loneliness. Looking at their worried faces and feeling their compassionate hugs only deepened the sense that I was letting everyone down. I felt like a spectator in my own life, watching as the world kept spinning around me while I couldn't keep up. And so, depression settled in, turning every small task into a monumental effort. Deep down, I knew something was wrong, but the idea of reaching out for help felt as distant as a star in a cloudy sky. The crises started becoming more intense. I found myself in situations where even the simple act of getting out of bed felt impossible. I'd wake up, and instead of feeling rested, it was like an even heavier weight was pressing down on me. I'd just lie there, staring at the ceiling, questioning if it was even worth trying to get up, if it was worth continuing. I remember one time, in particular, when I had to cancel an important project at work. My colleagues were counting on me, but I just couldn't focus. The computer screen seemed like a jumble of meaningless lines, and the code that used to flow so easily now felt like a foreign language. I knew I was letting everyone down, but I couldn't do anything about it. The guilt was eating me alive. At home, the isolation only deepened. My partner tried to help, but over time, he started to pull away too. It was hard for him to understand what I was going through. Honestly, it was hard for me to understand it myself. I'd find myself thinking that maybe it was all my fault. Maybe I just wasn't strong enough. The crying spells would hit me out of nowhere, catching me off guard. I'd hide in the bathroom so no one would see me break down. I didn't want anyone to know how broken I felt inside. There were days when I couldn't even speak. The words just wouldn't come out, and I'd sit there in silence, sinking deeper and deeper. It felt like the world was slipping away from me, and I didn't know how to reach back. It was at that point, when I could no longer hide what was happening, that I realized I needed help. But accepting that was a huge struggle. Part of me still believed that I could fix everything on my own, that it was only a matter of time before things got better. There was also the fear of what others would think. Asking for help meant admitting that I wasn't okay, and to me, that felt like admitting I had failed. I spent weeks resisting the idea of seeing a doctor. My parents, worried, suggested I talk to someone, and for the first time I didn't get angry at the suggestion. My partner was persistent too. "You don't have to go through this alone," he told me one night as I curled up in silence on the couch. I knew he was right, but the shame was overwhelming. I felt weak. Finally, after another breakdown where I couldn't leave the house for days, I scheduled an appointment with a psychiatrist. Just picking up the phone and making the call brought a mix of relief and fear. The relief came from the thought that maybe I was taking the first step toward feeling better. The fear came from the unknown. What would happen next? Did I really need medication? Was it really that bad? At my first appointment, I sat in front of the doctor, and for the first time in a long time, I started talking about everything I'd been feeling. With every word I spoke, it felt like a tiny weight was being lifted off me. He listened calmly, without judgment, and explained to me that what I was going through wasn't weakness. It wasn't my fault. It was an illness, and like any illness, it needed to be treated. That's when my journey with therapy and medication began. It wasn't easy at first. The idea of taking antidepressants scared me, but I knew I had to try. Therapy was a challenge too. Talking about my feelings, about my fears, was uncomfortable. But over time, I started to realize that this vulnerability was what would help me find my way out. Little by little, things started to change, but so subtly that sometimes I didn't even notice. At first, it was just small moments of relief, like being able to leave the house for a walk, or finally feeling some enjoyment in simple activities, like having coffee on the porch. These moments might have seemed insignificant to someone on the outside, but to me, they were small victories, signs that something inside me was still fighting. I learned there wasn't a magic cure, but there were ways to manage the depression that, slowly, allowed me to breathe again. Therapy was essential. In the beginning, I thought sitting in a room and talking about my problems wouldn't make much of a difference, but I realized that safe space was a place where I could be honest, not just with the therapist, but with myself. I didn't have to pretend I was okay. I started learning about the triggers that fueled my depression. A lot of it was the constant pressure I placed on myself, at work, in my relationship, in being the person everyone expected me to be. Therapy helped me identify those patterns and be kinder to myself. It wasn't easy because, for years, I had been my own harshest critic. Another thing that helped was finding small self-care habits. Waking up and taking a shower, even on days when it felt pointless. Going for a walk, even when I didn't feel like it. Gradually disconnecting from work. Slowly, hobbies I had abandoned, like cooking or reading, started to re-enter my routine as ways to reconnect with something beyond the pain. My family played a crucial role too. Even though it was hard for them to fully understand what I was going through, they were there. Sometimes their support came in simple forms, like a hug or a text asking how I was doing. Knowing I didn't have to face this alone made all the difference. Over time, I learned that depression isn't something you conquer all at once. It's a continuous process, a daily balance of accepting the bad days and celebrating the small victories. As I made progress, moments of victory started to appear, even if they were small. I remember one particular day when, after a tough week, I managed to leave the house and walk to the nearby park. The simple act of feeling the sun on my skin and hearing children playing was like a breath of fresh air. I was there, walking slowly, feeling each step. When I sat on a bench and looked around, I realized that while the struggle was far from over, I was alive. Life was still happening, and I was a part of it. There was another moment that stands out in my memory. After weeks of therapy, my therapist suggested I try writing about my feelings. At first I hesitated, but I decided to give it a shot. I grabbed a notebook and for hours poured out everything I had been holding inside. It was a cathartic experience. When I finished, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my chest. It was a way to externalize the pain, to give a voice to what I had been feeling. These small gestures started to add up, and slowly, I realized I was making progress. I still had bad days when the urge to hide away was overwhelming. But these moments of joy, as simple as they were, began to multiply. I started finding pleasure again in the little things. Watching a movie I loved, having dinner with friends, or just taking a walk around the city. For someone who had felt so lost, this was a huge step. These moments meant so much more than I could have imagined. Each small act of normalcy reminded me that there was life beyond the pain, that it was possible to find a path forward, even if it was winding. And every time I got up from a difficult moment, I knew I was stronger than before. Looking back now, I can see how this journey has transformed me. Life is no longer a constant struggle. I've learned to recognize the signs that I'm drifting away from myself and to seek help before things spiral out of control again. While the fight against depression isn't over, I feel like I have more tools and strategies to face it. Today, I'm more honest with myself and others about how I'm feeling. The fear of being judged has lessened a bit, and by sharing my experience with friends and family, I've realized that many of them are also fighting their own silent battles. This gave me a sense of community, of belonging, a reminder that none of us are in this alone. There are still days when I find myself in darker moments, but now I can approach them differently. Instead of feeling defeated, I'm able to recognize them as part of my healing process. The belief that I am more than my depression helps me move forward. I remind myself that every day is a new opportunity for growth, even if it's just one small step at a time. I want to share a message of hope with everyone going through something similar. It's important to know that we're not alone, that help is available, and that it's absolutely okay to ask for support. The battle might feel long and exhausting, but every small bit of progress matters. Never underestimate the power of a simple, "How are you?" or a warm hug. Life, with all its complications and challenges, can still be beautiful. And even in the worst storms, there's always a path to the light. Reflecting on everything I've been through, I realize that depression has taught me valuable lessons about myself. I've learned the importance of being vulnerable, of asking for help when I need it, and of treating myself with compassion. With each new day, I understand that life is full of ups and downs, and it's okay not to be okay all the time. What matters is the willingness to keep trying, to find joy in the small moments, and to celebrate every victory, no matter how small. I'm learning to make room for joy, even when it feels far away. Moments of happiness don't erase the pain I've felt. They simply coexist. Every laugh, every gathering with friends, every new challenge I overcome is a reminder that life still has so much to offer. I'd like to end by sharing one final message with anyone facing their own challenges. I know how hard it can be, how suffocating the darkness can feel. But I want you to know, you're not alone. Even on the hardest days, there's always a way forward, and every small step you take is an accomplishment. Don't be afraid to ask for help, and remember that you deserve care and support. Depression doesn't define who you are. What defines you is the courage to keep going, day after day, searching for the light. With all my gratitude, Gabriel.
We've come to the end of Gabriel's story. His words serve as a powerful reminder that, even in the most challenging moments, there is always a way to move forward. The road to recovery can be long and filled with obstacles, but as we've seen, every step, no matter how small, is a victory. If Gabriel's story has touched you or someone you know, don't hesitate to seek help. Support is available, and there is no shame in asking for it. We are not alone in our struggles, and sharing these experiences can bring light and hope to those who need it most. Thank you so much for following this journey. If you found it inspiring, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel to continue hearing more stories of resilience and strength. See you in the next video.